Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11, and of course we're playing as Germany. Now this is the second start of this episode, and there's a couple of things we need to do but one reason it's the second start is not because of a crash. Fortunately, things have been going well here. Is I didn't like the outcome. So before you pick this, unless you want to just go with it, the Balkan questions. Arrange the Balkans with Italy. There are multiple things. We want this to be a German sphere. And it looks like the Italians have accepted that. Last time they didn't. So keep that in mind. Also, we're falling down a little bit more than I would like about leadership and such, so we're going to shift back more towards officers here, away from that. I thought we had a bigger cushion, and we also have other decisions here. Let's do abandoned equipment, that one. Okay, Allied abandoned equipment. Abandon their equipment at Dunkirk. Okay, well, even though this time we didn't have a Dunkirk pocket, it still sort of does represent capturing a lot of British BEF forces. And in between episodes, I noticed who we were fighting here. Montgomery is the, I'm presuming here with the 3rd Infantry Division. Maybe very much one of the units that are temporarily given over to French services, but just the harp is pounding on Montgomery. And so we have obviously 40% abandoned their vehicle equipment, beaches, and then some other lesser likely options. Yeah, it looks like the generic sort of thing. Some trucks, anti-tank and anti-aircraft guns. Okay. And we're also, let's deal with convert ocean liners to troop ships. Event here. Okay. Let's see. Since war broke out, maritime commerce is no longer safe, and a lot of ships are wasting alongside quays with no use. Maybe we should convert them to transports. Okay. Gain 2 in descent, money, manpower, no need. Where 7 liners placed in the production queue. Okay, we'll do this. I really don't like the descent part element of it, but we'll move all of these guys up to the top to get them through. And of course that is what they did do. I don't know why it has such a big descent. Okay. The rest we're waiting a little bit on until after we better deal with France. And we want to do, yep, and here. We got no reinforcements up here yet. Yes, we have. Okay. Kroners units. Okay, well. They look like they are going to make it, but I'm not going to risk not moving on other targets. That one is available. right there, so now you're better defended. And these guys, okay, they're still attacking. Heading that way. Long until they get that 40 hours, okay, well. Support that attack. Okay, you guys bring in the rescue from the French side of that battle here in Switzerland. Pushing down from there, good. We will rescue them, but it's a bit of a race. We're almost still pushing it west, but I think Dietrich's going to beat him there, along with Rendelik. Oh, wait a minute, these guys can attack. Okay, but these guys can attack here. We'll maybe stop this side of that attack. Okay, so that improves. Okay, well, yeah, they're pushing that way, so you push this way. I lowered it down to below needs just because we are so high on supplies. And we're getting quite a bit from capturing various capitals, so I figured I'd use it up for a while. But I don't want to, how do I put this? Want to be careful about that and not overdo it, because then we'll not be producing enough. Yep, we lost that. We start running out of supplies, we'll air support them. Well, yeah, attack into there. Might as well. Yep, Sep's gonna win. Still I'm a little worried about these guys. I just don't see much organization at the moment. Okay, amphibious light armor. Let's see. I'm reading James Holland's War and the East. It's pretty good. If you're looking for a really good detailed book on it, this is not it. Okay, it's a good overview, but it also it's really sort of personalized it because they tell bits and pieces of the story from personal perspective. You know, a commander of a squadron or a Stoffel or a person who's trying to refugee out of the Low Countries or whatever, and it's all brief sort of windows in it while covering the overall picture, and it's really good. And one thing that he says in the book that the Dutch had no tanks, and I thought about that and I go, yep, you're right, the Dutch didn't, because the Belgians did have some minor tank type vehicles, but very few, because I seeing that. But then I saw just after that a couple of photos of the Dutch testing out some tanks. Now, I don't know if you really want to call these tanks, but they do come under the term of amphibious light armor. What they were at least A1. I don't know if there were I had two photos, but only saw one tank in the photos, so it may just be A1. It was a Vickers amphibious tankette, if you will, meaning just it had a machine gun on it, and it's amphibious. And they, I believe, were specifically testing it out. And I don't know whether they bought more or just had the one or whatnot. But out here in the Dutch East Indies, so they had gotten that out for colonial rule. So, and this was in either the late 20s or early 30s. So amphibious light armor was around well before the start of the war. The Germans sort of never really did it too well. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of an overstatement. But, you know, they got stuff ready for the... we're testing and developing stuff for Sea Lion, I believe, all after the fall of France. Some of the quote-unquote amphibious tanks weren't amphibious at all. They were just sort of the hope and pray type. We've sealed these up well enough that we hope the seawater won't rush in. And so when we drive off the end of the boat, they had some like long tubes with a floaty thing on top. And that was for like an air intake and an exhaust for the engine, so that we hope that the water won't rush into the tank, and we hope you won't get stuck underwater, so that you'll be able to drive ashore. If you're driving a floating tank and it starts to sink, you can normally bail out of it. But if you have a sealed tank, normally it's a lot of water pressure to get the hatches open, to push, you know, 'cause you're pushing against the water pressure to get them open, to then be able to get out of the tank. Now, they did use some of those tanks, I believe, in crossing some of these major Soviet rivers, and some of the other lighter, like Panzer IIs with floats on them. And that's also just sort of a seal up the hole and add flotation devices to either side, and hope they don't get penetrated with, you know, enough damage. But at least there, if you're again having problems, you can scramble out of them. The floating Shermans, one group made it ashore pretty well. The other one, I think they all sunk. I don't know that everyone died in the ones that sunk, but they had some troubles coming ashore for D-Day. So it wasn't just like, oh, well, all the advances leading up to D-Day finally get you Well, floating Shermans, yeah, but those are, you know, sort of medium tanks. They weren't fair. It's sort of conditions dependent upon it. But so they were around. The British had the technology well in hand. The Soviets also, which I think they may have stolen that technology too from the West. But so special purpose armor. We're going to stop that. We just wanted to have it to be able to build special purpose armor. Not that we won't research any in the future. It's just no point in researching it anymore now, really, when we have other more useful techs, including 41 techs, just like basic artillery improvements and engineering improvements. Ski brigade, we like that. We want to do ski brigade. I know I shifted a lot away from it. I'm hoping to shift it back soon, but they look like they're holding out there, but we're going to cut them off. I don't. Okay, they're advancing well against the Swiss. We lost a province. Big deal. Okay, that one is impassable. Well, let's move this way. They finally won that, but we'll come in and reinforce that victory. You guys push into there. Not so much stalled, but I just haven't assigned any more tasks. Well, you see if you can race down there, and you attack as well. This direction. We're almost pushing deep. He just isn't quite as fast, so he has had more opponents in front of him. Very accept who is now down. See, the Swiss are trying to close the gap there. Well, we'll keep pushing forward. We'll keep it down and moving forward, though I don't know if it's so needed. Well, they haven't capitulated yet, I guess, the French. We gotta get a few more of their victory provinces. Okay, well, we've got a bunch of the south coast, might as well go over there. Okay, step one. Got there first. Leech and Dart, I knew that was a very fast unit. Okay, well. You push into there then. These guys are doing great. That's Bergens, huh? Race across France. Ah, cruiser damage control has advanced. Good. Well, probably we should cut back on some of this. Not just keep adding to it. Yeah, ooh, partisan oppression. Don't know why the Swiss are feeling they need to hold the French line up. I don't know why. Go down to Vichy. I don't get some of this stuff that it's doing. And I'm not saying they're gonna hold out forever on their own, or they could, or whatnot, but you should defend Switzerland as your sort of basic goal. Oh, you support armor attack. Okay, battle commander recognition. I'll just end this, yes, for now. Noise is too far ahead. And back up to Norway. You can move into there. You can attack that way. You guys can come down there speedily, and you guys can also attack across the river, but down that path. I'd be curious, because I'm sitting here thinking, you know, seeing whether it's France or Norway. What is it? Because I've visited some of, I haven't visited Norway, but I visited France and whatnot. And what does it feel like to live in a city or town or region in which historical battles like this has taken place? I've never done that. Well, not well. I mean, recent ones. I did. I will say I did. I consider, you know, almost 6 months lived in Edinburgh, and obviously there's, you know, fair amount of history going in Edinburgh, but still, in a way, it's still sort of a visitor. Of course, I've visited battlefields around Europe. Some, not many, but some. Visited some, mostly, well, few up here for the American War of Independence, and you know, some of the battlefields, some storming Bunker Hill. Now, of course, it's Breed's Hill, as they were really sort of stormed up to. That's all long since, you know, city built over. You know, there's, it looks nothing like the battlefield that it was, but say like Yorktown, it does sort of, you know, or, you know, the part of it has been preserved, so it's rather like it was, or somewhat like it was, that. And well, at least when I was out at Manassas, or Bull Run, if you will, a lot of that thing, it's been changed, but you know, there was through part of it was a wooden, paved with wood roads. You know, that's what they were. Some of the turnpikes, they paved them with wood. Obviously, that wasn't going to last long, but they just laid down wood planks, or almost railway type things, and for some of that. So obviously, it's in Henry House Hill. Henry House is long since gone, you know, but it's still sort of the same sort of geography, and I spent the day walking around that battlefield. So yeah, I've been to battlefield, but it's got to be a little different, because I'm sitting here thinking, you know, yeah, you know, so, you know, if I was, whether playing as Germany or Japan invading my hometown, it's just a game. But, well, there really was, you know, if you live somewhere near Dunkirk, or if you live, you know, obviously, if you live in Berlin, you know, there was the Battle of Berlin. So although we may be wargaming it, you know, he lived, and I just wonder how does, I mean, not that it's, well, I don't know that I'm expecting any great emotion, but just, are you aware of it on a daily basis? That, oh yeah, this is where, and every time I see it, I think of the battle, you know, that happened here, or something, you know, some building, you know, or something like that. Or is it just, you don't even think about it? I just sort of wonder, I guess. Think about these things maybe a bit more than I need to. I don't know. Whether you're aware of it. And of course, when I was visiting Scotland, I was doing it very much for research purposes, historical and otherwise. But so obviously, in doing it for those reasons, you are thinking about history. Now, most of the historical kinds of things that I was thinking about are, you know, in the 1700s and beyond. So even when you see some name on some family genealogical old tree thingy, who, whether they lived or died, you know, you have little or no real connection to it. But even if you never met them, your great-grandparents or something, that, you know, if you say, you know, well, Paris, there wasn't really much fighting. And that was mostly the fighting was, you know, when the Allies took it back. But Berlin, obviously, everybody who lived in Berlin was affected by the Battle of Berlin. Even if you evacuated, and a bunch of Germans evacuated before the real Battle of Berlin started, you're just affected by it by, you know, evacuating from the city and knowing that the city is basically trashed. You know, it's, you know, I don't know how much, what's the percentage of homes that may have been still livable or something of one sort, you know, homes or apartments or whatever, but it's basically trashed. Okay, we've lost a province up here. Yes, they're pursuing us. Army HQ 7S. That'd be sort of, you know, sort of a, not just an American thing, because obviously, we're letting all these continue. All of these, because until we get to like a 42, I'm gonna keep pushing with those. And float planes. And that's grayed out, and that's good because we are over pushing that. I know, you know, so it's not just like I say, an American thing, because yeah, the Civil War, you know, it's a while, but there were still survivors, like Gettysburg, and I've saved some photos for events dealing with America in like 1936 and later. So that's still, the Civil War at the time of World War II was still in living memory, just barely, but still in living memory. And so if you live in this part of the United States, you have a lot more military history, but still it is sort of far away. Still pushing. Well, we'll also push to there. Well, port the attack. They block any real counterattack. We just gotta get here, and they'll surrender and burn, or yeah, burn is the victory point, I believe. Yeah. pushing deeper into France. Now there's a lot of victory points in the Maginot Line. That's mostly to get the French to defend it well. But I think by looking at some of these out here, we'll be able to achieve victory. Hours up there. Well, you attack through there once you can. I'm gonna put the police, even though they're not very strong, into this battle just to give it another flank attack. That's a pretty unit symbol, I guess. Don't know that pretty's good, it's pretty. And then French. Drafting up again. Oh, the British sent in forces up here. That be an event, or are they actually Hey, we gotta get in on this thing. Okay, extra wide tracks have been developed. Yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that. Okay, so we've taken Brest, they're going at least to Lorient. Oh, you might as well attack us into there. Okay, we'll go down and help your SS friends. You're not going there anymore. You come down through here. Didn't even get to make it to the coast, did you, Rommel? Down to Toulouse. Anything else we should do now? I haven't wanted to create those. Well, I'll prepare the right share defenses. We could do that one. Okay, get that underway. British air attack on Berlin. Okay, British air attack on Berlin before 41. Berlin at 590 miles from London was extreme range attainable by British bombers, then available. It could be bombed only at night in summer when the days were long, and the skies clear, which increases the risk to Allied bombers. First RAF raid took place on Berlin, or raid on Berlin took place. I ought to read these better, shouldn't I? On the night of the 25th of August, 1940, when 95 aircraft were dispatched to bomb Tempelhof Airport near the center of Berlin, and Siemensstadt, of which 91 dropped their bombs in and around Berlin. While the damage was slight, the psychological effect on Hitler was greater. The bombing raids on Berlin prompted Hitler to order the shift of the Luftwaffe's target from British airfields and air defense to British cities. At the time when the British air defenses were critically close to collapse, it had been argued that this action actually may have saved Britain from defeat. Undoubtedly, Hitler ordered an increase in anti-aircraft defenses in Berlin. His preference for anti-aircraft artillery to defend against air raids was nurtured. Consequently, he ordered allocations of significant percentage of German war potential for this. Yes, this is all very important. Well, some of the story behind this. Of course, the Germans had bombed the city of Guernica in Spain as a sort of terror morale type Guernica here attack. There may be some tactical reasoning for it. I really don't know of any for the Guernica operation. The Rotterdam bombings were mostly a sort of terror bombing situation, in my opinion. Of course, the city had already surrendered when the terror bombing of Rotterdam happened. I say terror bombing because it's a psychological effect. It wasn't done to stop war production. It wasn't done to really tactically change the. It wasn't. They weren't bombing. They weren't trying to bomb. Trying to is maybe sometimes the key thing. Trying to bomb specific positions that the Dutch military were holding. They were just going to bomb the city generally. The bombers took off under orders to bomb Rotterdam, and since they had radio silence, they weren't able to be called back in time because the city had already surrendered. But that caused other cities to surrender because of that happening, and those were planned attacks. The German attack on London was admittedly something of a mistake. They had been attacking airfields and some other military-type targets in Britain. Particularly, it was Hitler who was reluctant to order general bombing of Britain. Now, the British and the French were very reluctant to bomb German targets, especially prior to the fall of France. The French even objected to a plan to mine the Rhine, dropping mines into the Rhine to then destroy barges carrying, anything, but presumably stuff being carried on the Rhine in barges would be helping the war effort to some degree. And they're probably right. And and to the point, if you're not even necessarily sinking everything, you're just simply stopping traffic for fear of being sunk. So there's a lot of this going on that both sides are sort of reluctant to start this in a way. Partially because they don't want to be seen as the first to do it. Partially over, I don't know, how do I want to say this? Is it going to be useful or not? I think is maybe a good way. They were rather unsure of whether it would be useful. There was definite great fear of mass, and I've talked about this before, of mass bombings of cities raised during the 1920s and 30s, but particularly the early 30s. Now, as soon as London was bombed, literally like the next day, Churchill orders counter raids against Berlin for multiple reasons. A lot of it is to do with morale in Britain, just to be able to claim, hey, we bombed Berlin. Now, Goering's something of a boastful person, boasted that the British would be unable to bomb Berlin. And I think part of that, though, is not necessarily being boastful. It's just he's looking through his own eyes. He couldn't bomb Berlin. If the German Luftwaffe of 1940 was sitting over here, I think it's almost not impossible. Maybe because you have the Condor aircraft, which weren't suitable bombers, but Germany almost has no bombers that have the range to go from with a bomb load of significant size. This is why I'm sort of hedging my bets here. But a significant bomb load of, and I don't have it in my head, but of significant size, take the bomb loads over, drop them on Berlin, and fly back, having enough fuel and range to do that. Because, as I've talked earlier, actually I was talking in the live stream for Hearts of Iron 4, talking about Germany and some of the bombings. Germany had developed a tactical air force. Germany was incapable of developing an air force, and I mean incapable of developing a strategic air force that would have been successful. That was Weber's plan. He wanted a strategic air force, the Euro bomber. Should they have built heavier airplanes? Yes. But there's a difference between building some and building an air force directed towards it. Some of you I know will be watching that, or have watched it, the thing that I posted. But it's just a production capability, not a technological capability, but a production capability that Germany just didn't have to produce enough aircraft engines, if nothing else, because I'm trying to think, what is it? It's the Blenheim and the Wellington are almost the same bombers from the British. It's just, I think the Blenheim, and I get these things confused, is the 2-engine sort of version of it, and the Wellington is the sort of 4-engine. And I'm sure there's other changes, but it's a very similar type of thing, I think. And it's not even that necessarily adding more engines you're going to go faster so much as you can go the same speed carrying more weight. And I'm sure you can go faster. Obviously, if you don't carry heavy bomb loads or something, you can, go faster. But Germany just didn't have the capability to build an air force that was going to strategically win the war. Maybe, if you're going to wait till 44 or something to start the war, and which was sort of the general sort of plan, yes, then you can build up your industry. But Germany at the time wasn't. Now, had they had a suitable, and they had been working on different, what is it, the Ju-88, I get confused with the model, bigger bombers that had more engines. Sometimes with one of them, and I'm not sure which, it was a 4-engine bomber that they did during the war make, but there was only 2 propellers. They basically had 2 engines in line with each other and had very big propellers, turning those things around to move the air instead of 4 propellers. But and they did build some heavy bombers, but they should maybe be the right term, have built some heavier bombers, not to win the war strategically, but simply to say early on in your war against the Soviet Union. Maybe you're not getting all the way to the Urals, but some night bombing raids, if you think you can get to and hit cities, whether Moscow or other places, you do that simply to make your enemies, like we're talking here, that Hitler orders lots of anti-aircraft defenses. And I've talked about, the idea of, do you have huge numbers of anti-aircraft guns, or do you have lots of fighters up there to shoot the aircraft down? Because even if you build all those same anti-aircraft guns, you can put them out on your front lines as the heavy ones as dual purpose anti-tank, anti-aircraft, and your light ones, well, also dual purpose, because they can be operating as sort of support weapons for the infantry, shooting at bunkers and things, sort of like heavy machine guns or whatever you want to call them, as well as anti-air, lighter anti-aircraft operations. So maybe you wouldn't even shift your production so much as directed your same production to different resources. And I can't imagine if you would, say, doubled the amount of anti-aircraft put out on divisions. And Germany starts, particularly the invasion of the Soviet Union, way under anti-aircraft gun, because they have gotten so used to controlling the skies and hardly feeling the effects of enemy air that you look at the orders of battle of many divisions. I haven't looked at all of the divisions. They do have anti-aircraft units within them, but I'm just talking about too few guns and out here. And so the Soviets are able to maintain airstrikes, which is a bother for the Germans. And then, of course, once you're dealing with, particularly once the Americans are in the Mediterranean, they just don't have enough anti-aircraft guns in divisions to push away, damage enough, whatever you want to call it, the enemy air to be effective enough. So had they shifted the personnel and the equipment down would have changed things. But bombing, and Britain did not in 1940 have the strategic air force to be able to win the war with bombers. But they did have the strategic air force to force Germany to react to them. And that's sort of there's a difference. America built, and Britain continued to build as well, a strategic air force to win the war strategically, in the sense not that bombers were going to, this isn't the idea of nuking all of German cities and all the front line, or just behind the front line areas, and then win the whole war with nukes. No, this isn't that. But the idea of bombing production centers enough to where they just can't either build artillery pieces or build artillery shells in any sort of number to be effective, so the guys at the front become starving of artillery shells. They might have food and whatnot. I'm not talking that. I'm talking, hit their industry enough that they just can't supply their fighting forces. The British and the Americans really try, particularly the Americans, try to fight the war that way. They want to, and it's partially some air war enthusiasts within the American military establishment, because in America, the air is still part of the Army. There's only the Army and the Navy. There's no Air Force. The Marines are part of the Navy, so there's only the Army and the Navy. And there's the Army Air Forces, and as things happen, and also part of the reason that the Americans want to do strategic bombing is so that they can have an Air Force. Chicken and egg thing. Britain has an Air Force. Germany has an Air Force. America doesn't have an Air Force. It has an Army Air Forces, meaning it's part of the Army. What does the Army want? Primarily, they want air support for their ground operations. The Air Force, or the people that want an Air Force, want to prove that they need an independent Air Force. And so if they're being tied to the needs of the Army, or being tied to the needs of the Navy, because the Navy has its own air arm, both land-based air arm, as well as a primarily, everyone knows, carriers. And obviously everyone could go look at, oh, you mean you're going to have like Air Force planes sitting on a Navy carrier? No, they need to be all in one. That's sort of which various nations have had the problem. And so like you have in the modern day U.S. Army, basically, we can find a few minor exceptions, but basically all, in the modern sense, all fixed-wing aircraft are in the Air Force. Basically, all rotary wing aircraft are in the Army. So if it's a helicopter, it's in the Army. If it's an Air Force, or if it's a jet, whether a bomber or fighter, it's in the Air Force. And then you get the problems of the A-10. We haven't built any A-10, the Warthog, in a long, long time, so they're way out of date. Now, they've been updated over the years, but they are some of the most significantly important aircraft the U.S. Army, or the U.S. government has. I want to correct myself there. Because they are a battlefield domination weapon. I don't think there's anything out there nearly as good. The Soviets have tried, the Russians later have tried, but the A-10 is just this wonderful ground attack aircraft. It's sort of low and slow jets, but they have, armor around the jet engines, so that it's hard to either one, it's hard to damage the engines, but also when the engines do sort of get damaged and fly apart, they're sort of contained within this, armored nacelle for it. It's a highly armored aircraft. Well, that's unsexy to the Air Force, because the Air Force wants to have cool high bombers and dominate, the airspace. So they want F-15s, F-16s, or the F-18. Well, yeah, which or the what is it, the F-33? I forget. The semi-stealth fighter. They want all these sexy, super high altitude attack aircraft. They don't want something that you almost consider, you know, should we have a bayonet on the end of this thing? You know, they don't want those, so they don't push for that. But it's what, and they've back in the 90s, I believe it was, they canceled. They're going to phase out the A-10 because we don't need it anymore. The Air Force doesn't need these A-10s anymore, and we're still using them desperately and need every single one we can get. Like I say, they're having problems keeping them in the air, trying to get spare parts for them, but they are so useful, whether fighting, you know, remote guerrillas or bashing into Saddam Hussein's armored divisions. They just kill ground targets like crazy, and they are really hard to destroy, even if you have surface-to-air missiles, because you shoot a surface-to-air missile up there and they go boom, boom. Oh. The pilot notices, hey, one of my engines isn't working anymore. Okay, well, let me do a few more passes and fly home. So if you hit a F-16 engine with a surface-air missile, it stops working because there's only one engine in it. And depending on where and how the surface-to-air missile blows up, it, you know, because sometimes it just gets close enough and blows up, it may not overly damage the aircraft. You know, so, you know, it's that kind of thing. And we need a new A-10. You know, it needs to be very much like the old A-10s, and I'd be happy with just sort of making old-style ones, more of them, but the U.S. needs them. The Army needs them desperately. The Air Force doesn't need them because it's not its role. So, this is some of the problems. Goering does have his own Air Force, but it is designed for multiple reasons. Some of it is Goering's lack of knowledge. Some of it is just the idea Goering was impressed by numbers. What can you build more of? Single engine aircraft, you know, Stukas, or 4-engine aircraft. You can build more single engine aircraft. So, and Hitler's also impressed by numbers too. So, the Luftwaffe for its day and age is a great tactical battlefield support weapon. Now it starts showing its age a bit with something like the Stuka, which is a great tactical dive bomber, if you will. Now we can discuss whether you should do dive bombing or strafing attacks. Those are two different ways of going at the same project. And also they insisted that some of the other light bomber types in Germany be dive bombers as well, and so they increased their cost of production greatly, also lengthened the development time greatly. So, you know, it just really makes them more expensive, longer to produce, and it's entirely unnecessary because you already have a dive bomber. But the Stuka does, and the Stuka is great that it's slow, because so that you can dive bomb, so you're not going at the ground too fast. So you can sort of, you know, a human can, like, you know, aim and get there and release and pull out and get out, where if you're going really fast, the problem is once you're up against particularly the Americans, but also the Soviets, they're slow, so they can be caught by other fighters pretty easy, and if you're not able to escort them and control the air, they are a problem, so they start showing their age. But as a army support weapon, the Luftwaffe does pretty well. So this is why it fails on the Battle of Britain, because it's not designed as such. And there's also a lot of misuse in aircraft. Goering loved the 110, called them destroyers, thought they were the wondrous things, and they used them incredibly badly. They were really fast. They're not really maneuverable. At times, they were meant to be trying to be used as fighters over Britain, and the Luftwaffe was sending up 109s as escorts to the 110s because the 110s needed escorts. Where they were good at being was going after enemy bombers, because you want, well, bombers part of it, and as Germany goes along, it started out At the start of the Battle of France, if you will, Germany had no real air defense system. In events we built all these air defense guns or whatnot. But I'm talking about a system, like where the British, they have their radar. And there's chain home and chain home low. Chain home has like 100-mile range out. And so they've gone all of the west coast from, I don't know whether quite up here, but maybe up here because of the naval bases, all the way along the west coast to all the way to the south coast. It entirely has chain home that can look 100 miles out from the radar station. So they get them fairly close to the border so they can see 100 miles out. They also have chain home low, which has much less range, but it's designed to see aircraft coming in low. So if you're coming in low along the wave tops, if you will, it's designed to spot them. But it's not that good of a radar. It just sort of says, there's a lot of something coming this way. And at some point they lose it, how much of something. I don't know. Just to get enough, because it isn't very precise radar. You just get enough returns to know, could be a lot of fighters, could be a lot of bombers, or it could be a super lot, or just, it's just, how much it is, you can't really tell. Because, again, you're not getting back, my understanding of it, individual pings. You're just sort of getting back a bunch of noise that's sort of showing up coming at you. So they also have all the spotters along the coast as well, all through inland. And so they've set this up even before the fall of France. They were setting this up. And so the spotters don't really know how effective the radar is, but their job is to see. Oh, and also the radar doesn't tell height, altitude very good. And so the spotters can determine altitude and also determine numbers and types much better. So that all gets reported in. And so the part of the key is to know the altitude so that you can get above them before they get to where you are. So you can, whether you're diving out of the sun or diving out of the clouds or just coming from above, you're coming down in on them. So if they're coming in at, 5,000 feet, 10,000 feet or whatever, I'm not good at that kind of, knowing that kind of stuff. You can just be an extra few thousand feet above them and dive in on them. So Britain has this whole network set up as an air defense network or an air war network. And it also includes anti-aircraft guns and barrage balloons and all the, the other stuff. Now, Germany did have some of that, but they didn't. They, over time, and I know we're going to be having some of this from previous playthrough, and I think revolverheld has improved it. They develop this stuff, but it all comes after the fall of France. And so, Germany is incapable of stopping bombers coming in, particularly at night. And so this is why Hitler likes the anti-aircraft guns, because they don't have... the 110s. They would have been great once you have information coming in to go up and to know, the general path, to maybe fly from one air base to another to quickly refuel, as they're coming, if they're going to come in deep, you can move nearby, and then you can come up into and strike at the bombers. Now, you still have the problem at night of, running into each other on, your own aircraft, and so night is never very effective. They get better and better and better as the war goes on, but it's still limitations. But in the daytime, the 110 can be a great interceptor. And then you also try to have fighters up there to, especially if it's, in the zone early on of escorting bombers, you can go after the bombers' escorts as well. So, okay, so we gained some descent more and lose. Okay, didn't like that previous descent. Now, I talked too much, but hope it was interesting. Wanted to have the defeat of the France, at least, before the end of this episode, but I guess it will not to be. We're back up to this because of the supplies. That's why we're underproducing. Again, I've in the past, way in the past, gone down, let's just go down to 30 supplies, and then I wake up and realize, oh shit, I've, you know, way underperformed. And because there will be events, a bunch of them, in my opinion, and I haven't gone and modified it this time, more money focused than I think is good. But a bunch of events like need conditions, but then, you know, like after a year date, but also need lots of supplies and steel and whatnot to build like the Atlantic walls and things like that. So you don't want to go down too low on that. So on that lovely note, we're going to end this episode. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for liking the videos, and if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, please. And of course, please post questions, comments, suggestions, ideas, corrections. And on that note, scroll down to see if anybody's posted a correction on what I've said. I hope it's informative. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.